All right, hello and welcome to the Theotivity Podcast. My name is Thaddeus, and I'm so glad that you tuned into this episode of the podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about classical education, classical Christian education particularly. And it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've been growing in as I've continued to study it. There's been many different books and authors who've influenced me, one being particularly Doug Wilson and his book on classical education. That book will probably come up in this discussion today. But I've got a really awesome guest that I'm excited to talk about this. You may know his name from other podcasts, but he's actually now starting up a classical Christian education academy in the Niagara region. So for those of you who are maybe listeners around that area, I hope that perks up your ears and perhaps that you can go check that out. So my guest today is Ryan Eras, and I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Thaddeus, I'm doing really well. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, let's roll the intro and we'll jump straight into this episode.
The Theotivity Podcast. Theotivity is the place where theology and creativity come together. Here you'll find audio narration of articles, episodes exploring the faith, culture, the arts and media, systematic theology, apologetics, guest interviews with Christian thinkers, creatives, pastors, theologians, and much more. At theotivity.com, you'll find articles and resources to help you grow in your faith, as well as a portfolio of creative works. Like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest content.
All right, so Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background and how did you get into classical education?
Yeah, sure. That's a fair question. I know this one. So I was I went to school. I went to university to do a degree in history with an ambition to become a teacher. And through a series of twists and turns, as a lot of people experience when they go to university, I discovered there were more and different vocations that I had never realized existed. I discovered things about myself and my skill set that I had never really thought of or thought of as a career or vocation before then. Long story short, I ended up working in editing and publishing, and your listeners will be familiar with the work of Joe Boot and the Ezra Institute. And for many years, I was very blessed, very privileged to work with and for Joe and the Institute, editing and publishing books, producing the podcast for Cultural Reformation that they continue to do, and just being in and around that work of cultural apologetics and Christian theology, Christian philosophy, with a view for a Christian vision for all of life and every part of life. Yeah, in that time, I got married to my wife. We've got 5 kids now. 4 of them are school aged at this point. And when my oldest daughter was a toddler, we were introduced to classical Christian education through the work of Westminster Classical Christian Academy in Toronto, and that's where our 2 oldest went to school for a few years before we moved away from the city. I served on the board of that school for a time, and we got introduced to it. We have been enthusiasts of it since then. Since moving here to the Niagara region, we have been classically homeschooling our own children, and that has been a real blessing. We've learned a lot about ourselves, about our children, about the means and ends and approach to education, and we've had the opportunity, and maybe we'll get into this as we talk a little more, but we've had the opportunity to share our passion for classical Christian education, specifically with several people who we've come to know through church and other networks here in Niagara, and that is what led us ultimately to begin this new school that is starting up in September.
Right. And maybe just share a little bit of what's your position in, or role in all of that in starting that school.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have recently, just in the past couple of months, stepped away from my work with the Ezra Institute in order to take on the leadership of this school at Niagara Classical Academy as the headmaster. So that's my role. I did not get into this because I was looking for something else to do, but again, through a series of providential events, this is what we believe the Lord is leading us to be doing at this point. And I will say, maybe we'll have some advice for other people in a similar situation. But one of the critical things that sort of allowed or encouraged me to take this step is that I've got a very supportive wife, and that is going to be critical if you're going to undertake this kind of project. Your family needs to be fully on mission with you. And that's not to say that my wife was unsupportive of my work with the Institute, but the passion that we both share for education is something that was really one of the big things that allowed and enabled us and encouraged us to make this change.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I mean, I think a godly wife beside you is one of the things that is probably the biggest factor on determining a man's trajectory of his life, right? So definitely feel that. You mentioned a little bit about that for a while that you guys were classically homeschooling, and
Yes.
then now obviously you're going full on into the classical education in terms of a school and a academy, right? I might want to come back and touch on that a little bit, just because that's something, and that's just me being selfish here. I get to talk with people on this podcast, and sometimes I just use it for asking my own questions of things, because
Yeah, man,
that's
it's your
something that
show.
we're wrestling through. Yeah.
I'm at your disposal.
Yeah, man. Because that's something we've been wrestling through too. Is you could theoretically homeschool and use a classical curriculum, but also wanting to talk through, okay, what's the pros and cons of not just doing that, but looking at actually perhaps forming a school. Anyways, before we get there, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's back up a bit, right? Yeah. So Ryan, I don't want to assume that everybody knows what we're talking about so far. So let's back up a little bit and just actually define what exactly is classical Christian education. Maybe give us a little bit of its history and how is it different to other forms of education. Particularly I'd like for you to maybe emphasize how it's different from what the typical public education is. But maybe if you can give us just a broad overview of what exactly is classical Christian education, what makes it classical, and well, I hope we should know what makes it Christian, but maybe you could also talk about that.
Yeah, of course. So there are two adjectives in there in this form of education, classical and Christian. And as you hinted at there, the more important one is Christian, right? Classical Christian education takes its name because it is a style, it is an approach it is a methodology and a philosophy of education that originated in the classical period of history, the Greco-Roman period. And this was the Greeks and the Romans. They were not Christians, right? They were pre-Christian Gentile pagans. They didn't have the gospel, and that showed up in some very significant ways. Who qualifies as a citizen? What does it mean to be a human being? These are questions that they answered in a way that is not in step with the gospel, right? Slavery was rampant, abortion was rampant, but what the Greeks and the Romans had, sort of in terms of their pedagogy, in terms of their educational philosophy, was first of all a vision for and an interest in a well-ordered society, and a willingness to pose and seek to answer questions about the big questions of life. What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be good? What is virtue? what sort of person should we be training ourselves and our children to be growing up into? So these are. It was a question. It was an education that was and is concerned not primarily with how much do you know, but with answering a question: what do you love the most? So that's really one of the key ways that a classical and Christian education distinguishes itself from other approaches to education. What is the kind of person that we are seeking to create? In an 18-year-old in a graduate. Look at that. To look at that portrait. Look down the line, and consider what kind of person are we trying to train? What kind of a person do we hope that this child will be as a result of coming through this educational methodology? And that is a person who is, who loves wisdom, who loves virtue, who can think and speak clearly, who can articulate a position, who is not ashamed of holding a position that might be unpopular in whatever current cultural situation you find yourself in. It's concerned with what is the timeless and abiding truth, the principle from the Word of God. How does that apply to any given situation? So this is an education.
So would you say that one of the primary differences is that it kind of is aiming to shape children, obviously, into like not just from an academic or intellectual standpoint, but in terms of all of them, the totality of their person, their affections. You mentioned virtue, character, those sorts of things. So it's taking in morality, virtues, strengths, like trying to, I guess, form kids holistically, as opposed to only in the intellectual side of things.
I mean, that is true. I will say that all education does have that same moral component. That morality in education is actually inevitable. That's an inescapable part of education. But a classical and a Christian education believes that an objective standard exists for what is true, for what is good, for what is beautiful, and that and as classical Christian educators, in a professional capacity, and even just as parents, we want our children. You mentioned Doug Wilson earlier. He famously says that you don't just want to train your children to meet the standard, to conform to the standard. You want to train them to love the standard. So it's this educational process is a forming of taste and a forming of love and affection, so that you love the right things, and you love in what's called an ordinate way. You love ordinately, to an appropriate degree, a rightly ordered series of loves.
Right,
so there is academic rigor. It is an education that does emphasize academics, but it does so kind of in a way to get at the formation of a child's soul, to help them to become a more wise, virtuous, loving, joyful person. It's not challenging academics just for the sake of high test scores.
Right. One of the things that Wilson draws out in his book is the whole concept of paideia.
That's right.
Which is a Greek word that actually comes from that classical Greek education, right? Paideia. And, when you talk about paideia, when a child was formed in the paideia of back then would have been the Greco-Roman world, it means that they're being inculturated into that world, that there's a certain culture that's being imparted through the education process, that like you said, it orders their loves, it orients them and shapes them into a particular type of person. Now, it's interesting that within the Greco-Roman Empire, it was forming, the goal of that paideia was to form good citizens of that kingdom of Rome, right, of that empire. And I think it's a very apt thing for Christians now to adapt to a Christian form of that, because we are supposed to be formed into citizens of a heavenly kingdom, of Christ's kingdom, which obviously has its implications on earth as well. But that's why paideia is so important, because it's an inculturation into some kingdom. The fact is that, like you rightly touched on, that there's no neutrality. You're going to be shaped for some kingdom. And as far as the Bible goes, there's only two kingdoms. There's a kingdom of light and a kingdom of darkness. So Christian paideia is trying to shape little souls for the kingdom of light, to be citizens of that kingdom in a holistic way, not just in their minds, not in a pietistic way that's separated from the rest of their life, but it's just a wholehearted enculturation.
Amen.
So maybe let me just direct you. Maybe touch a little bit on how classical education does that in a way that's different to other forms of education. Because we've agreed that like every form of education is shaping and going to some sort of telos, a goal. But how is classical education doing that differently?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we like to say in our family is that as Christians, as Christian children, we want to help our children grow up into their inheritance. You mentioned two kingdoms: the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. That's I entirely agree. And just to push that a little further, the Apostle Paul says that, do you not know that we will govern angels? We will rule over angels. So we are citizens of the heavenly kingdom, but we are citizens with responsibility, not just for us. We are citizens, but with a domain underneath us, something, whether it's, my children who have to exercise dominion over cleaning their bedroom, or, and as you grow up from there, you exercise dominion over cutting your lawn, over making dinner, over your job, your business, anywhere you're called, you're there as a representative of the kingdom of God. And so my wife and I, we like to we have three boys, and we like to we have a little sort of call and response that we do with them. And so they when they're starting out on anything, and we know, my oldest boy is 8 years old, like they still need direction, they still need a lot of control. They're 8 and under. But anytime that we've got, you've got seat work to do, you've got to sit down and focus on something. We're going to call you to do that. We're going to show you that you need to pay attention here. And we have this call and response thing where my wife or I will say, "I am indeed a king," and they'll respond, "Because I have learned to rule myself." And that's kind of their cue that this is a self-control time. This is a quiet work kind of time. This is a time to focus. And so that's
I like that. I might steal that.
Hey, the classical Christian education community is very giving. So it would be my pleasure and delight to see anything that I have said or done be useful to somebody else.
Yeah. That's awesome. So how is it different? How is it different from the other approaches towards shaping and forming kids into a particular, telos? Yeah,
for sure. Well, again, and I try to be honest, I try not to push too negatively on other things, partly because, especially here in the Niagara region, there are several Christian schools. They're not classical, and they know it, and we don't hold that against them. Like these are godly people, and may the Lord bless their work. In terms of the public system, first of all, one of the big distinctives of the classical Christian tradition is that it takes responsibility for its own heritage. So here in the West, we study Western history. Well, public schools are increasingly getting away from that. That is an increasingly, colonialist, misogynist history that is better left ignored in the minds of a lot of secular pedagogues today.
Yep.
A classical Christian approach to education does not try to, chuck works like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn down the memory hole because it uses language that's triggering to students in our day and age. It's these are works, important works of Western literature, and they, what for good or for bad, we don't paper over, we don't gloss over our failures. We acknowledge them. We evaluate them in the light of the eternal word of Scripture. Because it's only the Christian position, it's only the Christian worldview that has a standard for saying, well, this this language, these social relationships from another era, they were objectively sinful because this is what the Bible says about what a human being is. This is what the Bible says about human relationships. But it's only from a Christian worldview that we can stand there and make that assessment. So in a secular, godless kind educational context, you are quite literally being cast about on every wind of doctrine. Whatever is being condemned this month, this season, that's the thing that you're being taught against. Whatever is being campaigned for, that's what your school projects are going to be about. And this is
very appropriate this month of June, where the Rainbow Jihad is very much in full sway.
It's flags are out front in that one, absolutely.
Yeah.
So and that's again, that's not only is it not an accident, it's inescapable. You're going to secularists, Christians, self-consciously classically educating Christians, we are all educating in a direction. It only remains to be seen, is that in a God-honoring or is that in an apostate direction?
Right. And you mentioned that word worldview, which is really, I think, central to all of this. And I like that, you're making it clear that you're not poo-hooing other Christian, schools who are trying to educate from a Christian worldview, because that's really the core of what we want to impart is that worldview, a Christian, a thorough, robust Christian worldview that's not just limited to, the four walls of a church and what I do in my private devotions, but it's a faith and a worldview that must exert itself and affect all of life and how we think about every single area of life. And every education imparts a worldview. Every education forms students into, actually, I'd say, the worldview of their teachers. That's from Jesus himself. He says every student, when they're fully trained, becomes like their teacher, right? And
that's right.
If your teacher is a blue-haired liberal, teaching your kid about why, drag time story hour is a good thing, guess what your student is going to be when they're fully trained by that. So it matters, the worldview of the education matters. And I'll say this as well, too, just a caveat on the Christian education side, because you can have a Christian education that's really just a regular secularized education with some prayer and Bible slapped on. It needs to be intentionally forming from a Christian worldview and Christian presuppositions in every single subject matter, from math to geography to science to literature. All of it has to come from a Christian presuppositional basis. Otherwise, you just slap in some prayer and Bible over what's really a secular education.
That's right. And I guess to take what you're saying and push it into the corners a little bit. This is why we believe. I mentioned we've been homeschooling for several years. We had our kids in school in Toronto. We'll have our kids in school again in the fall here. But this is why it's critical. Whatever schooling choice you make, God has entrusted you as parents with the responsibility for your children's education. Now, what form that takes, what that looks like, that there is wisdom, there is discretion, there is sort of contextualizing that principle. Whether you're going to homeschool them, whether you're going to send them to school, but it is your responsibility. So if you've got kids in school, and maybe it is a Christian school, pay attention to what they're coming home with. Pay attention to what is going on. A Christian school should not be closed to parents. So at our school, we want parents there as often as they want to be, as often as they can be. Whether it's supervising outdoor time or field trips, things like that, or just coming in to pay attention. We understand our responsibility as taking that portion, that responsibility that God has given to parents, and stewarding that to provide those children with an excellent education. So we are not directly affiliated with any church. Our board members and our faculty come from a few different churches in the area. We are not affiliated with any particular denomination. We do not do things like a chapel session. We're not opposed to it. Many Christian schools do, and that's fine. But we don't believe, and we've all got firm and settled opinions on baptism, eschatology, all of the things that it's fun to argue about amongst brothers and sisters in Christ. Those are, but so we have opinions on those. We believe and take positions there, but we do not think that that's our responsibility to teach and to press on someone else's children. We're going to raise our children by our convictions, and we're going to encourage and equip other parents to raise their children according to their convictions. So that is not something that is part of the curriculum. There are Bible classes. We will teach those perspectives, but we'll teach them as subjects. We are not going to teach them as positions that we expect them to take that will conform to our position as teachers.
Right. So it's more, it's not like you're launching a Presbyterian Classical Christian Academy or a Baptist, Classical Academy. It's more of a, would you say, you can disagree with this, but it's kind of like a mere Christendom approach to classical education, where it's the core essentials of the Christian faith that we all, at least all Orthodox Christians should believe, such as the Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed, those sorts of creedal formations that form the core of what makes it, the adjective Christian.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. We're creedally Orthodox, Trinitarian, Nicene, but and actually, somebody informed me about this very recently at an information session, because I actually used that exact language. But someone said, "Oh, you got to pay attention, because that's what a lot of that's what the queer movement is doing now. They're calling themselves creedal because the creeds don't say anything about sexuality." So that's
right.
I guess that was just a naivety on my part, but we do just in case anyone's hearing that and is free associating that term creedal with this new co-opted meaning. One of our pillars, one of our distinctives, is that there is a clear creational difference between boys and girls, and we acknowledge it and honor it and teach to it.
Right. But I still like that distinction that y'all are making between the realm of education and the school and the realm of the church, right? You're not trying to get into ecclesiastical matters, but you're trying to do education. And it kind of comes down to that whole concept of sphere sovereignty, right? That you've got different spheres that have their appropriate and legitimate authority, and the proper place for a child to be learning things about their what should form their beliefs on ecclesiology should be within their own local church under their own local shepherds.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Yeah. Cool. So how about we jump back to the question I had? Why not just, continue homeschool, classical education, maybe, even have like a group of homeschooling families together? Why launch actual school?
Yeah, very good question. And again, my style, my educational preference is for a classical Christian approach. That's why we're here doing this. As I said before, of those two adjectives for education, classical and Christian, the most important one is Christian. That's the one that I'm going to exhort and rebuke other Christian parents if they are not doing that. But I'm not going to exhort and rebuke another Christian parent for not having their child in our school or in a classical approach. That's a decision that that they have to make. So, yeah, it's a very good question. The reason is that, and especially here in Niagara, there are several Christian schools, and there are several pretty big Christian homeschooling networks. That's also a big thing here, and we've participated in those too. The schools, none of them are distinctly classical, and they know it. And there is a growing interest, especially since COVID, especially since people were pulling their kids out of school or having their kids sent home from school. There's been a growing awareness of and an interest in a distinctly classical approach to education. And there is no school that is doing that in a comprehensive way here. And several of those schools are connected to churches or denominations. So if you're not, if your family are not members at, one of these 7 supporting churches, you're not eligible to apply. You can't enroll your kids to begin with. So again, because we kind of straddle several church and denominational fences, we do not we don't have those same limitations. And the existing Christian schools, whether they're ecclesiastical schools or more broader Christian schools, a lot of them are oversubscribed. A lot of Christian schools like to take families, like to take several kids from the same family. And that's what we like to do as well. We don't want to split them up. But in a lot of cases, the grades don't shake out evenly. Like nobody has, 20 students in grade 1, 20 students in grade 2, 20 in grade 3. It doesn't even out that way. So your parents are looking for a place, and schools are saying, well, I mean, we have a space for your 9-year-old, but not for your 6-year-old. And so then, what are they going to do? We exist, not by design, but we fill a role as kind of a pressure valve on some of these existing schools, where there's a faithful, legitimate, consistently Christian option for parents who are not able to have their whole family at one of these other schools.
Right. Yeah. It's good. I think Doug also mentioned in his book, or might have been another book on classical education, about talking about, whether you choose homeschooling or classical. One of the arguments he made is like, you can just do a lot of things within a school context that you can't within these isolated homeschool groups, basically. There's a culture that you can build within a school that you just can't do exactly the same way with, disparate homeschool groups, right? And I actually really resonated with that, because I think back to my experience of high school back in Trinidad, there was definitely like a certain school pride. There was a culture to that school. There was affinity to the alma mater. You were building allegiances to one another and to a particular culture and in-group. And those are things that you can do quite effectively within the context of a school. And I think while they aren't like necessarily primary things, I do think they aren't unimportant things and things not to consider. So, maybe, I don't know if you want to expand more on that, but that was something that kind of rocked my boat a little bit and thinking, okay, yeah, maybe there is a lot of more merit to school than just only homeschooling.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. It is an often overlooked point when you're sort of down in the weeds of looking at, as a parent, what curriculum am I going to use? Who am I going to sort of ideologically follow? What track am I going to fit in here? But zooming out a little bit, we see this as a long-term project, and the deliberate cultivation of a school culture, of a shared educational experience of students from several families with the same values, the same commitments, the same educational background. Like, they understand the same references, they understand how to approach a problem in the same way. This is not, we didn't do this for us. We didn't for myself and my wife and for the other middle-aged parents who are starting this. This is not because we were looking for something to do. We're looking, generationally here. We want to build that shared culture because our culture is fragmenting, and we acknowledge that. But we want to have people that our kids can marry. We want to have people who are going to be like-minded on all the important things, so that they can build, strong, effective, God-honoring households, so that our region can be revived, so that we can work to build up a faithful presence within this region and spread out beyond that. So we're it's a post-millennial vision for education, and we understand that if we're looking at building culture as building a cathedral, then it's been given to us, maybe to lay a couple of bricks, right? Maybe to frame in this one window. That's all we're going to have time to do in our lifetimes. But we want to do that well, and we want to set up our children to carry on and build on and improve on what we have done with and for them. So that is
that's good.
The cultural aspect of education is actually very significant.
Yeah. And I think, like, in terms of just thinking strategically, incrementally, and generationally, that's perhaps one of the most fruitful things that Christians can band together and do, is to start schools. I mean, you look at the Protestant Revolution, like how many Ivy League schools came out of Protestant denominations and churches and churchmen, right? I'm thinking of pretty much all the Ivy League schools in the US have their roots in Protestant tradition. And there was a reason behind that. That was a way to build culture. That was a way to equip the next generation. And those institutions would be the ones training up the future leaders of the society. So you can actually affect quite a bit of change in your locality by starting a school building that shared culture, like you were saying. Also, I'll just kind of plug a little bit, because I've realized that we've touched on some things that we probably can't dig into a lot more. But I do have a previous episode on, public education versus Christian education, and whether if it's a legitimate choice or not for Christians to send their kids to public school. So I'll just point our listeners there. If they've not heard that episode already, they can go back and listen to that, just for some biblical argumentation on what we've touched on already, where Ryan said that it is our responsibility, particularly as fathers, Ephesians 6 says, to train up our children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. We can't expound too much more on that here, but I'll point you to that episode. Go back and check it out. I want to move us along here, because I want you to share a little bit, because perhaps there's some people interested in this, and maybe I kind of know some people who are interested in perhaps starting classical education of their own. What are some challenges that you faced, and joys as well, in starting up this school? And maybe share a little bit more on what, because I know in everything that you feel like the Lord's hand in, there are certain key moments and things that happen providentially that just give you reaffirmation that yes, this is where the hand of the Lord is pushing you. So maybe share a little bit of that, challenges, joys, and then some providence that kind of reaffirmed your path.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe just to back up just a little bit, we started this school during the the insanity that was the the early years of COVID. Everyone was sort of casting about for what are we going to do now, and a lot of Canadians and ourselves included, we were looking to get out of here. And I actually had a job offer from a place in Tennessee, and my wife is American, and we thought this is tailor-made fire escape for us. But the more that we prayed about it, we had no peace about leaving. And at the same time, we had, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people who were sort of thrown into homeschooling, or who were looking to level up. People with kids in the same about to tick over from elementary to middle school aged, like ours. We were having a lot of conversations with other parents and families, and because we had a background in classical schools, we were able to be a resource to a lot of them, and that was kind of where the germ of this school began. And we've called it Niagara Classical Academy, and we did that for a reason. A lot of classical schools will name themselves, for a historic figure, or for a Greek or Latin term that connotes an idea or a value that they want to sort of demonstrate or espouse, and that's all good. But we gave it the name that we did to demonstrate that we're here, we're for the region. We're planting a flag here, not for ourselves, but for the Lord, for the kingdom of God, and for the growth and flourishing and revitalization of this area through that culture building educational activity that we just talked about a minute ago. So that is why we're here, and that is why we're here doing what we're doing. And some of the joys have just been to meet people who, if you were to take all the Christians that you know of in your head, all the Christian families, and just put them down on a spreadsheet and go through and tick off who would we have, who are we going to make, who's going to be on the team. Like, we've got people who it never would have occurred to us that they would come, they would join, they would put the shoulder to the wheel here, and they're here, and they are they're cheerfully working and giving time and providing insight and sharing what it is we're doing, sharing it with the wider community. And that has just been such an encouragement to see that kind of support, sort of totally unexpectedly or unlooked for from certain quarters. And similarly, some of the difficulties, some of the challenges. There are always going to be people who, there's going to be early enthusiasm. And you will have attrition for whatever reason. Maybe it's a legitimate reason. Maybe it's just kind of cold feet. But you will have people who, you were in some measure counting on, who have dropped away, and that's happened with us. And that I get the lesson there. We've been again, God's been very kind to us, and we have good people around us, and God has given us a vision that we can stick to. So we are not so that is, I guess, the principle there. Stick to your vision. If your vision is to build a school, then keep on with building a school, don't make your vision to keep on good terms with the businessmen, right? That's not to, do that if you can, like, by all means, but right. you stick to your vision. Don't water down what you're doing or what you're offering because a family is able to pay full tuition. That's do what you say you're going to do. Don't let your vision be watered down because somebody is asking for an exception here or there that would fundamentally change what it is you're doing.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because I've seen schools start off great and then go sideways because of just that, right? And I think it's so important to start off with that. This is our charter. This is what we're sticking to. We always come back to it, and we don't waver or swerve from that, because part of hopefully the desire in building these things is that you would have like somewhat of a bulwark, somewhat of a beachhead against the cultural storm. And the more that you make these little compromises, the more you weaken that beachhead, and you actually end up in a generation or two, perhaps even quicker, going the same way as all the other schools that have not done as well. So that's actually, I think, really good and wise advice for people who are looking at perhaps starting their own or becoming involved in one that's already existing or in one that's starting up, such as you guys. To really know that you have to have clarity about the vision, about the charter, and be on board with 100%, sticking with that through thick and thin. This is what we're not budging on.
Yeah, that's been it's a difficult lesson to learn in the moment. When you're looking at your organizational bank balance and you're looking at a family's application. It's real tempting sometimes, but stick to the charter. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, and even on that, like, I think not taking the king's coin as well, because that could be a temptation as well. Like you said, rightly so. Yeah. Like, a lot of Christian education struggles financially, and there is that temptation to take handouts from the government, and you can rationalize it off, oh well, we could do so much good with this and whatever, but as the saying goes, who takes the king's coin is the king's man, right? So
amen.
Really to free yourself from that sort of influence, and just upfront saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to trust the Lord to provide.
So that is and actually that's a really good distinction, and I don't know, I haven't investigated all of the schools in the area, but if you're if you are looking into a school, make sure that if you want a truly Christian education, this is not the determining or defining thing, but it is an essential factor. Look for a school that is constitutionally opposed to taking state money. That is our position here. That is written in our founding documents, and that is for exactly the reason that you've said. You take those government shekels, and they turn into shackles real quick.
Nice, I like that saying.
So yeah,
that's good. Well, I think we've covered a lot here. I'd love for you to maybe give our listeners some maybe resources that you want to point them to, particularly if if this is totally new to them, this whole concept of Christian classical education. Maybe there's some resources that can help be like an intro, and maybe you have some resources that are more a little bit advanced. Maybe it's for somebody who they've heard of it, they're still kind of wrestling with whether or not it's the right choice for them. Feel free to just plug. Also, you can feel free to plug your own resources as well, and the school that you're launching. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. So this, and you sent me this notification ahead of time, so I came prepared. This is an introduction to classical education. by Christopher Perrin. And this was, it's, 40, 50 pages long. You can read this in an hour and a half. This is what first got my wife and I really enthusiastic about this vision for education, right at the time when it mattered, when our daughter was 3 years old, and we had to start thinking about these things. So that's where I would direct anyone who says, "Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that." Start there. That will explain the origins, the vision, and sort of as a cultural movement in North America, where we're at and where we're going to. You've already mentioned Doug Wilson's book, "The Case for Classical Christian Education." That's another superb, more than an introduction, and it's kind of and it kind of straddles a few different genres between pedagogical philosophy and operational handbook, and sort of the practical, the theoretical, and it's an excellent resource as well. I don't have that in front of me. I actually loaned that to one of our board members, so he's reading it right now.
Nice.
This is another one here. This is Wisdom and Eloquence by Robert Littlejohn and Charles Evans. And this lays out what in more detail. It lays out what a classical Christian education is meant to accomplish in terms of forming a person's soul and creating, graduating a young adult who is equipped to go out into the world, to understand it, to take dominion of it in a God-honoring way. And then finally, again, this is just a little book. You mentioned homeschooling, and that's something that has always been kind of dear to our hearts. It's called Classical Education and the Homeschool by Wes Callahan, Douglas Jones, and Douglas Wilson. And it's just a series of essays, again, 60 pages on how to take some of those things that are easily accomplished, naturally accomplished in a school, because that's what the school is made to do, and how to take them and approximate them in a homeschooling context where you don't have the same division of labor, you don't have the same kinds of resources or inbuilt peer culture. So those are that's where I would direct people who are interested and who might want to even take the next step and get more acquainted with this area. And then,
awesome. And where can people follow what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thank you. So again, that's Niagara Classical Academy. Our website is niagaraclassical.com, and we're on Facebook. We don't really have the manpower to do a whole bunch of social media right now, but we are active where we can. For those of your listeners who live in the Niagara region, we'll be offering classes in September. That's our location is on South Pelham Road in Welland, kind of right between Welland and Fenwick, right smack dab in the middle of the peninsula region here. And if I may be so bold, we're hosting a fundraiser in just a couple of weeks on June 22nd, and we're trying to, especially this first year, we're trying to get our feet underneath us, start out strong, and that's happening. We are a registered charity, so that's any gifts that are made in support of the school are tax deductible. So that's June 22nd. And Aaron Rock, who I know you're familiar with, and I expect many of your listeners will be familiar with, the pastor at Harvest Bible Church in Windsor, and they have a Classical Christian Academy there that they've started up a couple years ago. They're doing fantastic work there. Aaron is coming to, he's agreed to do our keynote address for that. So he's going to come and he's going to talk about, again, why it's important, why it's a strategic, as you said, a beachhead initiative to establish a school and the value of a distinctly classical school in the region. So that's something that we are doing just very soon. And we're opening doors in September, and we would love to hear from you, whether you're interested in in supporting us, whether you're interested in enrolling your own children, or whether you're in a different region of the country and this is something that you want to start for yourself. We are again very delighted to have those conversations.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I might be tapping on your shoulder sometime soon for some of those conversations myself, but definitely directing listeners towards you guys, and praying that the Lord is going to bless this venture and just see it multiply over the generations, man. Really excited and hope that it's been a blessing to our listeners as well. So you guys, if you're interested in this, make sure to check it out. I'll make sure that all the links for the resources and also for Niagara Classical Christian Academy is going to be in the description on the podcast, on the YouTube video, on the Facebook post, whatever, all the things, right? So you should be able to get it there. Any last words do you want to leave our listeners with?
Thaddeus, no, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for what you're doing. And again, actually, I was thinking we got right into it, but I was actually sort of thinking ahead of time about how to introduce this thematically with your theotivity theme. And there's a great line. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book "The Mind of the Maker" by Dorothy Sayers, but this is she just talks about this sort of intersection between arts and literature and theology. And very early on, she makes the point that in Genesis 1, when God says, "Let us make man in our image," she observes, at this point in history, we know very little about God. God has not told us what he is like. What we do know about God is that he creates. What we do know about God is that he speaks and he makes. And so whatever else man is, the desire and ability to create is part of his nature. And that is a principle that jives very well with the classical Christian education theme that we've been talking about, and that is something that I see you exemplifying in the work that you're doing with theotivity, and I would just commend you in what you're doing. So again, press on, fight on, and win.
Yeah, thanks so much, brother. I'll have to check out that book because I've actually never read that book, but that's actually something that I've said time and time again when I talk about theology and creativity, that exact same point, that in Genesis 1, all we know of God up to that point is mainly that he's creator. And that says something about us being made in his image. Really good insight. I'm going to have to add that to my Goodreads list. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. And thank you guys for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Until next time, Soli Deo Gloria, and go create something good for the glory of God.
Amen. God bless you.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Theotivity Podcast. If you found this content helpful or edifying, please leave a review on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, follow us on social media and consider sharing this episode to help Theotivity reach others as well. Check out theotivity.com for resources, info on how to support, and subscribe to our monthly newsletter to stay up to date on all the latest content. Until next time, live and create to the glory of God.